All right, so today's learning objective, students, simplify and or evaluate expressions containing fractional exponents. So a number that is raised to the power of 1 over n is the same as the nth root of that number. So that'll make more sense when I show you some examples. For instance, if I have 3 to the 1/2 power, that means I'm taking the second root of 3. So the second root, that's just a square root. And so we don't have to write the 2, we would just write it as a square root of 3. Okay, the 2 is assumed to be there on a square root. Okay, another example for your notes. If we have 16 to the 1/2 power, that means I'm just taking the square root of 16. What is the square root of 16? 4. Okay, so on your whiteboards, I want you to simplify 49 to the 1/2 power. Okay, so it's the square root of 49, which is 7. All right, this is for your notes. All right, 1 to the 1/8. That means I'm just taking the 8th root of 1. But any root of 1 is going to be what? 1. Because it doesn't matter how many times you multiply it. 1 times 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 1 is still 1, right? And if I take a root for 0, well, this one, it's actually okay. You're just taking the 5th root of 0. Well, 0 times 0 times 0 times 0 is still 0. So any root for 0 is going to be 0. All right. So if it's not one that you can take, you can just leave it written in the root form. So for instance, I'll have you guys give this one a try on your whiteboards. Write it in radical form for me. All right, so we end up with the 7th root of 2. Okay, back to your notes. All right, I've got 81 to the 1/4 power, so that means my root is 4, so I'm taking the 4th root of 81. So I ask myself, what number times itself 4 times is going to equal 81? Yep, I already heard it out there, 3. Because 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 equals 81, right? So the 4th root of 81 is 3. Okay, and you might sometimes have a problem like this, where they've taken 2 and put them together. So if I want to do the 32 to the 1/5, that's the same as the 5th root of 32. And 9 to the 1/2 is just the square root of 9. So what do you guys think the 5th root of 32 is going to be? Yeah, 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32. And the square root of 9 is 3, so it equals 5. Okay, this last one on this page is for your whiteboards. Okay, so looks like most of you didn't have a problem with the square root of 121, but the 4th root of 256 was giving some of you a hard time. So what was the square root of 121? 11. Okay. So when you're trying to figure out the 4th root, these problems are not going to be real big. So 2 to the 4th is 16. 3 to the 4th is 81. So the next one to test would be 4, right? 4 times 4 is 16. And so 4 to the 4th is going to be 16 times 16. Does everybody agree? And that is 256. So the 4th root of 256 is 4. The same numbers are going to be showing up over and over again, so eventually you should pretty much know these by heart or like recognize them when you see them. But you can always just start testing 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not going to be probably anything bigger than 6 or 7 on most of these problems, okay? All right, and so that equals 15. All right, so now we're going to go the other direction. So if I have the square root of 10, what I have to remember is that I assume there is a 2 there. So don't forget about that too. And so that would be 10 to the 1/2 power. Okay? Or if I had the 4th root of x, that's just x to the 1/4 power. Okay? So remember that this part is your root, and this part is your base. Okay? So on your whiteboards, give that one a try. Okay, so 11 is your base, y is the root, so 1 over y becomes your exponent. Here's one more for your whiteboards. All right, don't forget that when you have the square root, it is the second root. So it's m to the 1/2. Okay? That's going to probably be the most likely place where you're going to make a mistake, because you're going to forget about that too. So remember that that's assumed. Okay, so if we have a number that's raised to the power of m over n, there's two different ways you can write it. You can either write it the way we have it on top, n square root of x to the m power, or you can put it in parentheses and have the nth root of x and then raise the whole thing to the m power. Basically, it depends on what type of problem you're dealing with, which way you're going to want to do it. If you're dealing with just variables, then you're going to use the first way of writing. But if you're dealing with numbers, you're going to want to do it the second way. You're going to want to take the root first and then raise it to the power. And the way you can remember also what's on top and what's on the bottom is, if you think about it, where are the roots of a tree? Are they on the top of the tree? No, the roots are under the tree. And you can think of the person who has all the power as the person on top, okay? So the power is on top and the roots on the bottom. So for example, if I have 8 to the 2/3 power, okay, it's going to be easier if I take the root first than if I square it and then take the root. So I'm going to take the third root of 8 and then I'm going to square it. So what times itself 3 times is going to give me 8? 2. So that means I've got 2 squared. So the answer would be 4. And here's one more for your notes. I've got 81 to the 5/4 power. So of course I'm not going to want to raise 81 to the 5th power and then try and figure out the 4th root of that. I'm going to take the 4th root first, and then I'll raise that to the 5th power. So what number times itself 4 times did we say was 81? 3, yeah. And then I've got 3 to the 5th power, which ends up being 243. Okay, so on your whiteboards, I'm going to have you do 8 to the 5/3 power. Okay, so I'm taking the third root of 8 and I'm raising it to the 5th power. 2 to the 5th, 32. Okay, this next one is for your notes. I've got 3,125 to the 2/5 power. that means I'm taking the fifth root of 3125, and then I'm going to square it. So like I said, on these problems, it's not going to be a huge number when you're done with it. What do you guys think might be the fifth root of that? 5, right? So you can check it. 5 times 5 is 25, times 5 is 125, times 5 is 625, and then sure enough, times 5 comes out to 3125. So the fifth root of that is just 5. And then you have to square it, so the answer would be 25. So anytime it's ending in 5, there's a good chance the root's going to be 5. All right, on your whiteboards, I'd like you to do this one. Okay, so we are taking the fourth root of 16 and raising it to the third power. Don't get tripped up and only take the square root, though. The fourth root's 2, and so 2 cubed is 8. Alrighty. Okay, now we're going to go the other direction. So this one's for your notes. Again, you want to remember that this is your root, and that's your power. And of course, the x is your base. So we're going to have x to the 5 over 4. And if you have a square root, what number do we have to assume is in there? A 2. Don't forget about that too. So if it helps you to write it, go ahead and write it. So my power is on top. That's the 3. The root's on the bottom. That's 2. So it would be 5 to the 3/2. So when you're done writing that down, do this problem on your whiteboard. All right, so what's my base? What's my power? And my root? Y. Okay, let's do this one on your whiteboards also. Okay, so again, if you're going to forget about that 2, please write it whenever you have a square root. So that's y to the 7 over 2. All right, this next one is for your notes. All right, so now I've got x to the 6 over 3, y to the 9 over 3. Then you reduce the fractions. How many times does 3 go into 6? 2 times. How many times does 3 go into 9? 3 times. So your answer ends up being x squared, y cubed. On your whiteboards, I'm going to have you guys do this one. Lucas, what am I going to assume is on the outside of my parenthesis of my root? A 2, yes. All right, looks like most of you guys are getting it. X squared, y to the 6th. All right, this next one is for your notes. All right, now I've got a mixture. I've got fractional exponents mixed with roots. So I'm going to turn everything into exponents. So if I'm taking the 1/2 power of x to the 6th, y to the 4th, it's like I'm taking the square root of x to the 6th, y to the 4th, right? And then I have the square root of y squared. So what is half of 6? Right, so basically you're dividing each of them by, by 2, right? So yeah, half of 6 is 3, half of 4 is 2, and half of 2 is 1. And so then you combine your y's and you get x cubed, y cubed. Alrighty, so let's try this one on your whiteboards. This one's a little more complicated, but I think you can do it. Just take care of the top first, and then take care of the bottom. There's a hint for you guys if you're struggling. Okay, so we're about out of time, so let me finish this one off for you guys. If I have x times x on top, I have x squared. If I have y to the 1/2 times y to the 1/2, what's 1/2 plus 1/2? 1. So it's just y to the first power. And then x to the 5/5 is just x to the first power. I can reduce one of my x's so you end up with xy.